Again, thank you for those that are watching. My name is Paul Wills with Plante, Moran, CRESA. And this evening we're here to do the 2020 Bloomfield Hills Schools Bond Program Quarterly Update. And so we've got some great news that we want to share with you this evening that the district should be very proud of, the board should be very proud of, more importantly, the community should be very proud of going forward. So we've got three parts to the presentation this evening. The first one is just a quick financial update relative to where we're at with the first series and the timing for the secondary series going forward. We have a construction cost update for those amounts approved by the board to date, as well as a contingency update for those items that were allocated in the program but also approved through the process to date. Then we're going to focus a little bit on construction. We got some aerials from both North Hills and South Hills schools. And just talk real quickly about the next presentation after ours is what is that process as you get into Conant and to Way? One is East Hills and West Hills, and then of course Series 2, and then we'll open up to questions as we go through this. So without further ado, just as a reminder, in August 2020, the district residents approved a $200,155,000 bond program. That first series was sold in 2020 of roughly $94 million. Congratulations, through hard work, through a lot of effort from your administrative team, really from August until we're at today, the district actually has committed $87.9 million. So from a Department of Treasury standpoint, you're supposed to have that 85% of those funds of that $94 million spent. So congratulations, you're 2 years ahead of schedule. Again, you were doing a lot of work at the middle school and the high school, and you'll see that as we go through the presentation. The first series does include the design and construction of North Hills and South Hills, as well as the additions at Conant Way, which you'll be seeing here in the secondary update. As mentioned earlier, we're actually doing some piling of technology and furniture, so it was great to see some of the administrative team, some of the building principals and central office get out into the industries and look at several different, actually I think there's 6 to 7 different manufacturers of furniture. So as the district's looking at doing that committing of roughly $10 million for the fall of 23, ensuring that the user groups are really having an opportunity to do that, and commend Mr. Schilk and his team for incorporating the technology piece. So again, with that whole instruction drives construction mantra for both technology and furniture. So spending, right now what you have is just the construction costs. So again, contract budget, this is the post bond. Here's the forecasted budgets as you see in the committed. So about $62 million has been committed for construction. So you may say, Mr. Wills, you just mentioned $87 million. Where's the rest of those funds? So again, that's some of your professional fees relative to some of the technologies, also some of the permitting costs. As you can imagine, we're working on getting permits. Spent to date, as crazy as it sounds, we're doing about $2 million a month in construction spend. That's actually going to increase to about $3.5 million through the spring and summer of next year. So you'll be expending these funds very, very quickly going forward. And then just for those out there, the second series really about $26.8 million of construction. So again, there's roughly $10 million of furniture, about $20 million of technologies, and that's how you get it to the $200 million going forward. From a budgetary standpoint, $18.2 million was construction contingency and escalation for the whole program. To date, if you go back and you'll see the $62 million. So if you remember from your board award, about $6.2 million has been approved for those contingencies. I'm actually happy to report through this quarter we've only spent $610,000, primarily in site work and dewatering, also temporary enclosures. So when you start taking a look at how do you build $24–25 million next to students safely, there are some things that were not necessarily foreseen as you start taking walls down from a 1950s, 60s building. So this represents about a 3% of the overall contingency, or of the $6.2 million, only 10%. The good news is we're actually out of the ground. So the foundations are in, the concrete's being poured, the walls are being poured. So a lot of those unknowns are not necessarily being taken into consideration. The good news is a lot of that design work, a lot of that reviews with Mr. McDermott and his team to look at the drawings holistically, get out on the sites, take that time, has really helped lower that contingency cost going forward. And keep in mind, any contingency that's not used is the district's funding mechanism. So again, for $610,000 for this rate of construction is pretty impressive. So North Hills, the total program is about $55.2 million. As you can see here, there's really 3 major components with secured vestibules, access controls, and again, the learning services team, when they look at Conant, we have a very similar secured vestibule. So you come into a secured vestibule, you come directly into an office with locked doors, access controls from that aspect of it. Educational classroom additions, so it's hard to see on this picture, but if you drive by Losser, you can actually see the Losser site. You'll see all the foundations with the little safety pins on the re-rod sticking through the walls for the, I'll call it the south and the west walls are actually up to the full height. So things are progressing well. Multi-purpose common space, again, starting to lay out some of those foundations and underground infrastructure, such as the outlets for technology. Special education, obviously technology and furniture are part of that pilot. Construction of the new pool within the aquatic box, if you will, has begun. That'll commence for the next 12 to 14 months. Most importantly, roofing, mechanical, electrical. So the good news is we bid everything out early. We locked in all that pricing, even though we're not going to do the roof for a year and a half. So we've actually avoided about 7% escalation costs for roofing, mechanical, electrical from that aspect. So I commend the board for making timely decisions and allowing the construction to proceed accordingly. At South Hills, again, the pad for the addition. So this would be the Arts and Auditorium addition. You can see it on the right-hand side. We actually had a chance to meet with the neighbors. As you can imagine, when you have backhoes and bobcats 55 feet from your back door, again, how do you be good neighbors? So we're working with Bart Mel Builders on that. Again, secured vestibule access control. When you see some of the drawings of that, you've got a new secured vestibule with a hallway that kind of connects the auditorium and arts addition, which is great. And again, special education and technology integration for that. The turf athletic field will be done in the fall of 23. I'm sorry, spring of 23 in preparation for the fall of 23 sports. And then the turf field in-house, if you recall, was done ahead of schedule because there was some water damage and the insurance claim was able to pay for that. And then lastly, the critical infrastructure, mechanical, electrical, plumbing are still taking place for that going forward. So both of these screenshots are actually on the district's websites. There's actually live cams. You can actually go back in time and fast forward it. So it's pretty neat to see the walls go up really quick and people scurrying around the site. So where are we at with design? We think it was very important, if you recall back in the spring before we bid out north and south, to actually take some time with the Board of Education. So you had the project sheets that kind of comprised the bond scope. You had some dollar amounts. This is really an opportunity to really get into what's included in that design. So after this presentation, you'll hear from Todd Bidlack and his team of some of those specifics that are probably 30, 40 different user type meetings. And so right now where we're at is, again, taking a look at the preschool over at Conant several months ago at the board, just to reconfirm that. Obviously tonight you're going to see some of the development of where the classroom additions are going to be, the gymnasiums, some of the specialty spaces within there. So again, bidding for Conant and Way will take place actually in January, February. We'll be back here for the board. And then East Hills, West Hills, since they are larger facilities, there's no additions, but we're going through that startup process with design with the principals. And again, we'll bring that to you with the goal of, by the fall of 22, the 2 STEM labs at BHMS, or it would be South Hills, will be completed along with special education classrooms. The remainder of the classrooms and the work for the additions will be done for the fall of 23 when you're into that K5, 6, 8, and 9, 12 format. There are some additionals that are non-instructional spaces that will still be going underway through 2024. So we are right on schedule where we should be. If not, I think we might be a month ahead of schedule with bidding out Conant and Way right now before the holidays, and again, letting that go through the holiday season going forward. So Project 2 oversights, again, not going to spend a lot of time reading bullets, but there's still a lot of work left to do relative to it. Again, you got the East Hills, West Hills, which I mentioned, the new high school, which is actually coming up on 7 years old already. And then, of course, implementation of technology and the furniture throughout, and that really takes place 23 through 24. A lot of this information is also up on the district's website, so if you click on the bond page, and you look at the right-hand side, you can see the dollar amount of the program, the anticipated time frames, start times, and some of the key elements of what's included in that bond. And then again, same thing with the remainder of, I'll call it the non-K-12, but again, very important programs with the farm, the IA, Wing Lake, all the way through. And so just like we're doing tonight with Conant Way, we're going to come back to the board with East and West. Before we put pen to paper for some of these phase 2, we want to come back to the board and just reconfirm some of the goals and objectives of the district and of the board. So again, we're all rowing in the same direction. We're not reversing it. So lastly, sharing the bonds. So I want to commend Karen and her team from communications. Done a phenomenal job updating the website. So it's very easy as a resident to be able to click and see the progress. There's monthly dashboard reports, which include the financial reports, so people can kind of track the expenditures. We're actually starting a updates relative to the catchment areas in the January, February timeframe, meeting with the PTOCs, some of the neighborhoods, and again, We do have our annual meeting with scope of design as we start getting to those secondaries. So the communication has been ongoing and it's been repetitive, which is great because you can't tell them enough times all the great things that are part of this bond. On the horizon, again, I mentioned the catchment staff, so we're going to work with the principals. We're actually working with the mapping company that did your original maps, I think when you revised the boundaries prior to the high school. So again, those will be updated accordingly. And then again, basically through the fall or through the spring into the summer, just those community upgrades. Again, it's not happening till the fall of '23, but I think Superintendent Watson and myself have already met with some of the PTOs with the initial thoughts and concerns and just being able to incorporate that into the overall presentations. So again, lastly, can't say enough, hit the district's website, a lot of great information, but the good news is here we are in December and we're actually on schedule and under budget relative to the 2020 bond program. So with that, I'll turn it to President Matlow or any board members.